Welcome to the Inviting Shift podcast, where I'm your host, Christina Smith, and I teach women how to build authentic confidence so they can finally like themselves. Today, we're going to talk about resilience, and if you think that's a dirty word or it feels like you have to have no emotion, that is not what resilience is about, and we're going to change your mind. Today, my guest is Bernadine Rosso, and she is a resilience coach that helps women to connect with each other, get grounded, and more clear in their lives so they can choose more joy. Join us. Well, Bernadine's here with us today, and we are going to talk about resilience. Welcome, Bernadine. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Christina.
Yeah. So I know this is one of your favorite subjects, resilience. And of course, because I'm such a word nerd, I had to look it up to see, what does resilience actually mean? Because some people have a really negative connotation around it, and some people have a really positive. And the actual definition is the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties and toughness, which I think is great. I think the connotation that people have that are so negative is because we know it takes a lot of bumps in order to become resilient, and we don't love that part so much. So welcome, and tell us what you think resilience is about, because I know you do a lot of work around this.
Yes, I actually call myself a vision and resilience coach, because I actually feel like there is a part of those bumps, as you will call them, or challenges necessary for us to discover who we are, and how we react in the face of those bumps and those challenges is everything. Someone recently gave me the metaphor of a rock tumbler. You put in this rough edged, not so pretty stone, and then tumble it for hours or days, and it comes out to be this beautiful, shining, showing all of its beauty from the inside, piece of art to, look at and admire and know what it's been through in that rock tumbler to get there. So the topic of resilience came through from my own experiences. That's how I generally work, as whatever I'm having as insights or my personal growth journey, I share. And I know that there's other people out there, and I specifically work with women. I know there's other women out there having similar experiences or having challenges that they feel maybe alone in. And so in sharing my story, I want to let women know they're not alone, and that I'm doing my work too. And that it's not easy. It's not always easy, but it's extremely rewarding. I don't know any other way to live my life except to go through the challenges. So when I'm teaching resilience, and with the topic, my title I chose, Vision and Resilience Coach, it's like you pick a vision. What's important to you? What are your values? What are your priorities? What are your goals? What do you dream of? What are you passionate about? What brings you joy? What fulfills you? All of those things can begin to define your vision. And then you start on the journey and see what happens. And usually we're faced with, and challenges are inevitable. So a lot of people won't even start on the journey because they're like, oh, I'm going to fail. It's going to be hard. I'm going to, be judged. All those concerns come up. So I love teaching resilience tools because, like I said, it's stuff that I have used and been versed through over and over again, because these things don't just come around once in a while. They come over and over again. Life is very cyclical, travels in waves and spirals, and you never know what you're going to get, like the box of chocolates, all of those cliche pieces. But really looking at, like, how are you going to react in the face of those, and not just like paste a rainbow on it or put a smile on and bear it, but like authentically, how are you going to process what you're going through, and how are you going to come out a gleaming, beautiful stone on the other side?
I love that you say that without putting like just a rainbow on it, because I think that that's how some people try to get through, right? And they think that that's resilience. And really, it's like a bypassing, right? Like, I mean, there's so many bypassing that I talk about. There's spiritual bypassing where we're just like, oh, I'm not going to worry about that. I'm just going to let God take care of it. Well, it's still going through our body, our physical body. And so we still have to deal with that. Or there's, you know, what I used to do was mental bypassing is the thing that I'm really good at. Like I'll take the course and I'll learn this stuff and I'll go, oh yeah, that all makes sense. And then just assume that like, well, I know better, so I should be completely different now, right? Like I can logically see how that doesn't make sense. So of course, my feelings are just going to automatically go with it.
Yeah.
And then there's this other positivity bypass that I think is what, you know, putting a rainbow on it is like, yes, we want to be grateful. Yes, we want to see the full scope of the thing instead of just the negative. However, just putting a silver lining on it doesn't make the feelings go away. And so it's this, what I'm hearing from you is it's this processing through the things, going through the emotion so that when that emotion comes up again in the future, you can say, oh yeah, I get that. That's my abandonment issue. And that's, you know, that's just that same old story that I'm telling myself. And so we don't get triggered quite as emotionally by it. And I think that that's what's really, really important for me is that, and that's the whole reason I do the work, right? Otherwise it's uncomfortable. Why would I want to? But because I know that I can accept that in life, there's always going to be things that don't go my way. And that's the biggest cause of suffering is the world isn't as we wish to see it. And I think resilience is the thing that helps me manage those bumps because I've been through it and I'm like, oh, right, this is going to be one of those days where nothing works out the way I want it to. I'm just going to go slower, have more grace with myself, be more compassionate. So because I've been going through it, I know how to manage myself. So it's really a skill that I think is important.
Yeah. And I was going to say there's two things that I always look out for. Okay. One of them is as soon as the voice in my head says, this shouldn't be this way, that's a signal that I'm like headed toward disaster, right? Because it is that way. It just is, right? So how am I going to show up in the face of the way that things are? You know, whether it's a person being some way that I'm like, oh, they shouldn't do that. That's terrible. And I'm going to tell them, or I'm going to fix them, or I'm going to send them that book or that quote, and then they'll know.
I'm going to try to control this thing. Right? I mean, that's what we're trying to do is control things that we don't have control over. And I love how you were like, how am I going to show up? Because that's my big question in my coaching practice is like, okay, well, knowing that this is going to be uncomfortable, how do I want to show up with it? Yeah. How can I feel good about showing up in it?
And I just started reading up this book on emotional yoga, and it's this Vini yoga teacher. And I can't say too much about it. I know someone who is a practitioner at some point, and then this is the second time I've heard of it. And Deepak Chopra is all about it. And what it is using your emotions to begin to identify yourself or do self-reflective work or feel into what way your life wants to go, so to speak. Like some people will do it with psychedelic therapy. Some people will do it with breath work. Some people will do it with a hypnotherapist. Like there's innumerable ways to do insightful work. Dream analysis, right? There's all these tools. So what this book is saying is that utilizing your emotional process is part of that investigative, like what's moving through me, instead of invalidating as like, oh, I'm too emotional, or oh, this trigger, this, or oh, that person
shouldn't be angry. Yeah. I mean, I hate when I hear women say that I shouldn't be. Like, okay, but you are.
Yeah, I would say don't should on yourself.
Right. It's so shaming.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think for me, resilience really revolves mostly the way I work with clients is around emotions. It's those triggering emotions that really throw us off kilter. And I think for at least my belief is, and you can tell me what you think, it's because we haven't learned how to deal with emotions that are uncomfortable. Yes. And of course they're uncomfortable because we haven't learned how to manage them, right? So we all say that we want to be happy, but you know, if we look at the 5 core emotions, mad, sad, glad, fear, shame, that's one. The rest of those can be really uncomfortable for some of us. And when they become uncomfortable, we automatically want to shove them away because that's what we were taught in some way, shape, or form. Either in some families, you're not allowed to be angry, or, that's not something to be sad about. So our feelings were invalidated. And then on top of that, we saw really bad examples of how people who are sad that cry and expect you to make it feel better, right? Or people that get angry and become violent or aggressive. Yes. And so we're like, ooh, those feelings are really scary. Let's just put them away. And that's what I think really not only keeps us from resilience, but keeps us really uncomfortable. And we don't, like, every time these things come up, we get mad about them again because we're like, it shouldn't be this way.
I would actually even call it like that's the wound, right? So I was having this conversation with someone. It's like, it's important to complete the circuit. And this is like a psychology thing, right? Where you complete the circuit so you can be at peace with that thing, whatever happened. You can put it down. You can say, oh, I understand now why that happened, or why I'm feeling this way, or, like you see the bigger picture, you have an aha about it. But if you don't complete that circuit and it's left hanging, I was reading another book that talks about how that's how ancestral trauma gets passed down. And they've done studies on mice where the trauma will continue up to 3 or 4 generations if you don't complete that circuit. So we're actually dragging around triggers and these sensitive states of reactivity and overwhelm and depression because it's not even ours. And we're talking about war trauma, we're talking about abuse and suicide and, sudden death and, things that people, like you talked about, shove under the carpet or, put to the side or don't talk to their kids about. Oh, kids can't handle it or whatever. And nobody talks about it. And it's unresolved. And then it's this big secret in the family, Yeah.
And I love how you say, like, it's ancestral. Like, we don't even have to have the reason, right? Like, we don't even have to have the memory or the exact example of whatever the situation itself. But what happens is we start getting these wounds, and then it shows up in many, like, I always feel like looking at my wounds is like what do you call that with the beaver bop, where you used to like bop the little mole rat in the
yes, at Chuck E. Cheese. yes, I know exactly.
That one. You'd be like bopping the little mole, popping its little head up everywhere, and oh my gosh, because that's the reason why I think resilience, or working on resilience, the skill of resilience and confidence, are really important, because as we get angry at this thing or that thing or that thing, we start realizing that a lot of those things are connected. And the more, like you say, we move through it, we actually go through the emotion, we start processing it, we start looking underneath it and going, well, why is this making me so angry? Like, why am I so triggered around this? And for me, like, a lot of them come back to like specific wounds. Like, there's an abandonment wound, there's a not enough wound, right? And that's actually probably the one that I get the most is, oh, there's that wound coming up to tell me how I'm not enough again. Yeah. But the more that we go through it, and the more that I can see it come up and I can recognize it quicker, and I don't have as much of an emotional reaction, so that I can do deeper growth. Yes. Because I think so often we get sidetracked by these emotions. We get so overwhelmed. Even if we try to put them in the box and in the closet, they're still static in the back of our brain going on there. That's giving it attention. So the way to do it is really to move through it.
Yeah. So that's where I come in with, like, one of the second pieces that I really lean into is when there's that distracting piece, like when I get into kind of that terror zone, where I feel like I'm going to freeze up, or I feel like I can't go on because this thing is so, like, got me, coming around to being solution oriented.
I love this. My husband has asked me the best question. When I go ranting and raving, he goes, what is it that you actually need around this?
Exactly. And it's like, what? I forgot what.
I don't know.
I'm just really lost.
I just because I want to be mad. I don't
know. Yeah. So coming around to being solution oriented, and in that, I got some really great notes here. It's like,
great. Tell me about it.
Trusting that there is a solution. Because sometimes that hopelessness or that helplessness or that feeling of out of control is enough to just have you spinning and you don't even know like what the problem is.
And we even can get to that point where it's never going to get any better, right?
Yeah.
We all got to that point where like
Down the
everything
downward
in our brain
spiral.
goes negative.
Yes, exactly.
And then all of a sudden it's like, it's always going to be this
Yeah.
way. And it was like just yesterday was a sunny day. And now today it's like the end all be
The
all,
rabbit
right?
hole, or someone called it the rabbit hole, going down the rabbit hole.
Yeah. I call it the suffering spiral.
Yes, yes, all of those. And so even if you don't see a solution yet, trusting that there is one. And then that leads into the ability to trust yourself and knowing that you have everything that you need to find a solution, that you are capable, that you are enough, right? So this is like deep work. And then resourcing yourself from that place where you know those things in that moment of feeling challenged is everything.
Yeah.
And sometimes,
or if you can't do that, I would say, in addiction, they have HALT, which is hungry, angry, lonely, tired. I add sick and PMS and all that. If you're in one of those states and you believe that you can't get out of it, it is not a time for clarity or decision making. Like, go take care of yourself, feed yourself something, go get some water, go talk to a friend. But that is not the time to be processing, because that's when we go down that 3%, right? Like I always call it the 3% of the worst possible version of my life, right? And that's where I'm going when I'm uncomfortable. So we want to make sure that we are in a nice grounded space when we do our work.
Self-care.
And ask ourselves, what is it that I need about this?
Self-care is an act of resilience. That is like the simplest way to build your resilience, is making sure that your basic needs are met and making sure that you're doing the things that you love, that you're spending time going to your yoga class or going to the beach or going for a walk with your friend or whatever it is that like has you feel like, I'm enjoying my life and I feel good about myself. Like, do more of that, because then when the things that you can't control come up, you're like, wait a minute, I know who I am. I've been doing these things. I feel good in my body. What's the challenge? What's the problem here? I'm ready for it. So that is resilient self-care for sure. Giving yourself the things that you love and not feeling like, oh, I don't have time, or, oh, I don't deserve it. I have to give to my kids first. If you don't give to yourself, you can't be there for your kids. You can't be there for your spouse.
And especially not in the way that you want to show
your
up.
presence is missing.
That's the thing. I spent several years being really tired and exhausted trying to be a single mom. And I mean, I wasn't taking care of myself, and it showed in the way that I mothered as well. But I love this other thing that you said about, like, you have to believe that there is a solution. And like, I think this is a really important point, because a lot of us think that we have this growth mindset, but we really have a fixed mindset when it comes to certain things. I get women who believe that they can change anything, and then all of a sudden I start talking to them and they're like, well, that's just the way I am. I can't change that. And it's like, no, that's who you've allowed yourself to be, but you don't have to be. And so I think that there is a huge thing with realizing that just because we think it doesn't make it true, right? Like, but some of us are really still stuck into like, well, this is the way I've believed. It has to be this way. But what if it wasn't?
So this is the beauty of challenges, right? And this is why I'm like, go into them. That's where the good stuff is. So you start to identify these beliefs and stuck places where you're like, do I really believe that? And in the groups that I do with women, one of the first conversations is like, what is your identity? Who are you? What part of that is your choice and what part of that was given to you? And do you want all of it? Or do you want to get rid of some of it? Or do you want to reinvent some part of who you are? So that you can start to lay the foundations for the next thing. You're like, oh, I wish I had more money, or I wish I had a better relationship, or I want to be a mom someday. And if there's some limiting belief that's saying something that is not congruent with that, like, you're not going to get very far. So redefining your identity and starting to be like, maybe, like you're talking about, questioning those beliefs and saying, does this have to be true? Who says it's true? How long have I believed it's true? And are there ways to step out of that belief system what would that look like?
Is there any other way to believe? One of the greatest questions that I use for personal growth work that actually came from a corporate sales trainer was, what if the opposite is true?
That's awesome.
I mean, and it's like, and it can be, right? I mean, often the opposite is just as likely to happen as the worst of it, right? I mean, and we don't see that because God forbid we should actually get excited about something. But yeah, it's a great question to get curiouser and curiouser. Okay, I can say it. And I really thought you said something earlier about like, I don't know exactly what you said, but it reminds me, I wrote this book, Inviting Shift, you know, what the podcast is named after. And there's like 5 stages of shift. And I think what happens with people is resilience comes in mostly in the 4th stage. And by that time, people think they've got it. So the stages kind of go like this. Something isn't right. So we're unclear what's going on, but something's not as we want it to be. The second part is honing in and honoring, like what is, you know, that I know that what's going on, like how can I honor it before I let go of it or bring on something new or make that change. Beautiful. And the 3rd stage is like the aha stage that we all love. And this is where we're like, oh, I got it. Yeah, I'm just going to stop eating chocolate cupcakes and I'm going to be fine, right? whatever the answer is, right?
Yes.
But resilience comes in the next stage, which is the F stage, the fear and fortitude, right? So that's when we have this new idea, okay, I shouldn't be eating sugar or I should exercise more or whatever the thing is, right? But we have to put that into play. And this is where people, I think, give up on their resilience because the fear comes and goes, that's going to be really uncomfortable. I don't know if you really want to do that. Look at that thing. You may fail. What if you're not perfect on your sugar thing? What if you don't go and move? What if, you know, what if you move and you don't even get any results from it, right? Whatever, all those conflicts, those inner conflicts, I call them, start coming up. Because there's a part of us that wants to do the good thing, and then part of us is like, we don't need to do the good thing.
I want to stay comfortable where I am because I know the outcome at least, even if it's bad.
I want to keep doing the same thing and get a different outcome.
Nope, not going to work.
So that's where I think the resilience stage really lives, in this piece where we have to remember that just because we have the idea, we actually still have to make that choice. It can be the greatest service that we're choosing for ourselves in the world, and we still have to make that choice over and over again in order to align with that, which I think is what you're talking about and what I talk about when we talk about how do you want to show up. What is it that you actually want to align with, right?
Yeah. And I have been working with the aspect of resilience where I'm clear about what I want. I know the steps that I need to do. I start heading in that direction. And then something happens, like someone will say something like, oh, well, you didn't think of blah, 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 blah. Don't you know your idea is not going to work? And I'm just like, no, don't say that. And like, it's enough to like have me shut down if I don't have a team of people that are egging me on and reminding me how awesome I am. It just takes one person to be like, I don't know if you can do this, you know. What if the bad thing happens? And I'm like, I'm so sensitive to other people's influence and energetically and, you know, verbally and all of that. It's just my stuff, right? I'm not declaring that I am that way. I would like to change that. And that's where I'm looking at how do I build my resilience so that I am stronger in the face of those moments. That's what I'm working on personally.
Nice.
And it doesn't have to be a person necessarily. It can be a circumstance. It can be like, oh no, I need new tires on my car and I already did my budget. It doesn't include that. And now I'm in a panic, you know, like, is it going to throw me off my thing that I say I want to take action on and change and make better? So building resilience in the face of those moments when I'm like, maybe it won't work, you know, and still being able to take the next step. Yes.
Yeah, I always see myself at the top of that spiral. Like, am I getting on or can we walk away from it?
There's a really great simple tool that I've taken on that really helps in those situations. It's not always, I don't always remember to push that button, but it's a retraining because usually, and this is pretty common for most people, is when when the thing happens and you're like, oh no, this is it. The tendency is to have it compile, and that can look like self-sabotage in the form of like eating a pint of ice cream or staying up late or spending more time on,
or even just ignoring the things that you need to do
not
and,
doing,
hiding under a
or
rock.
like, or doing harmful things to yourself, drinking more or, eating more sugar, like the opposite of what you should be doing. So as soon as I feel that thing that wants to like send me down the hole because, screw it, it's never going to work anyway, kind of voices in there, I go, oh my God, this is the time when I need to reparent myself, right? Like lovingly parent myself and actually do the opposite of what my instinctual, like self-sabotaging or self-saboteur wants to do. So I'm like, okay, I need to take things out of my schedule. I need to go get a massage. I need to like go eat an extra healthy lunch. I need to
And
take a
it's super
nap.
hard at that point, isn't it? Super hard sometimes, at least in the beginning. It was really super hard, and it still is super hard for me to make that choice.
That's the push
to
button
do the
thing.
good thing.
Yep.
Because my default is to shame myself, right? I grew up Roman Catholic. And so if I do something bad, I should be punished, right? I mean, that's what I got. And so I always want to revert to shaming myself. So doing that nice thing for myself, giving myself grace or compassion can feel really, really hard in the moment because there's a part of me that like wants to punish myself as if that's going to somehow make it better or somehow make me do the right thing next time, right? And so it's really, it has to be a conscious choice for me to be like, again, like I see myself at the top of that slide going, am I getting on, Christina, or are we going to walk away? Like, cause once I'm on that suffering spiral, forget it. I mean, because that one thought is connected to a million other thoughts I've been collecting my entire life as to why I'm not enough. It goes back to that not enough wound, right? And so now I'm back to third grade. Remember that one time you did that thing in third grade? And it's like, Christina, like, am I really shaming myself about stuff that happened 40 years ago? Like, yes, they're all still connected if I want them to be, right? I can pop up all of those. This podcast is supported by Christina Smith Coaching as a service to get you to have more confidence and self-love. One way we do that is by bringing what we learn into our bodies by lighting up our senses. Some people call these types of exercises rituals. I think they're really alignments. Something we do each day to align with what we truly want rather than getting stuck in the default of trying to outrun what we don't. I bet you could use a little self-love ritual today, and there's a short quiz or survey to pick the best one for you. You can go to the link in the description to take the free quiz to get the self-love alignment that is right for you right now. You'll also get a download of 5 self-love rituals so you can switch it up and try one each day. Our little thank you for tuning into our podcast and into your own heart. So we're back and we're talking about resilience, and Bernadine is going to tell us about what resilience might look like, in case you're wondering, because, it's such a fluffy word and it's like, what does that look like?
Yeah, it's kind of nebulous. I know when I was in high school and younger, resilience had the context of being tough, right? Like, how can I survive something, or
thick skin.
Yeah, thick skin. And actually now it's more about how can I be more graceful in the face of challenges. So that looks like staying calm, the ability to stay calm in the face of conflict. It looks like seeing the bigger picture. I hate those arguments when you're like, well, you said this, and so that's why I said that. And remember you said that? No, I didn't say that. Well, you used that word, and this, like all the nitpicking, right? And it's just like, hold on, can we just step back and see the bigger picture here? Like, I'm getting you're having hurt feelings, and I'm getting that I came in kind of abrasive and I want to be responsible for that. And I get that, like, there's a even bigger picture of like, this is a repeating pattern and you're really aggravated and frustrated. And so am I. And how can we bring more love into this conversation and not have it be so entangled with all of these little details that, like, it's really not about the details. The details,
Right. What is it that we actually really want
yeah,
out of
yeah,
this,
it's
right?
fueled
Like, what is
by,
the concrete
Mhm.
ending to the solution that we're looking
Yeah,
for?
yeah, and it's being fueled by maybe some other issue. Maybe
Oh,
someone's
sure. Yeah,
concerned
sure.
about, a sick
Not being
friend,
enough,
or
being insulted, right?
Mhm.
I mean, whatever it is, I have a big trigger around not being smart enough. If I feel like somebody's talking to me like I'm stupid,
Yes.
ooh, I will automatically, I can't even catch that one sometimes. Like, it does, like, what did you say? And I know that's all about me.
Yes,
But in the moment, those are the emotional triggers that we want
exactly.
to build resilience to so that our life isn't just emotional chaos all
Yeah.
the time.
And I really get, like, there can be a compilation of things, like,
Mhm.
someone called and you had this difficult conversation and you're worried about them. And then, maybe you were expecting someone to show up and then they canceled on you the last minute. And then, your car starts making a funny noise, and just like the compilation of things. And then somebody says something and you're just like not in a resilient place, right?
It could even just be like, how you doing? And you're like, what?
Exactly.
Like, right.
Exactly. So it's just like noticing, hang on, bigger picture here. I get that, like, I'm agitated by several different things and it's not about you. So I'm sorry if I'm coming off abrasive right now. I'm not in a good place. I'm thinking about a million things. Can I share with you what I'm thinking about, what I'm worried about? And it's not that I'm angry at you. It's that I'm really, like, fearful about all these other things that come up. So bigger picture, right?
Mhm.
And then working with my clients, it's really looking at, who is in your life that tends to trigger you, and are you putting yourself, are you are you spending time with those people? Are you putting yourself in situations where you're saying yes to people that tend to trigger you, or remind you of your small self, and you're like, oh, but they need me, or oh, they're going to have a problem if I don't show up for them. It's like, you know what? Let them have a problem if it's going to create more problems for you, because you're going to be no good to them. You're going to contribute to their toxic whatever cycle they're trying to run on you. So being able to have discernment with the people you give your time and energy to is huge.
Yes, yes. I love the quote from Brene Brown that says, only share your story with those who have earned the right to hear it.
Aw, I love that.
Because I think so often we can pour our hearts out to people who just, I mean, nothing against them. Some people just don't have the
Yep.
capacity to really sit and hold space for other people
Yep.
in a good way. And so we just have to be really careful about who it is that we give our energy to
And
and
when.
who it is sharing. Yeah. And when, right. And so I know that we might have toxic family members that we might have to be around, but we get to minimize how much energy we give them,
Exactly.
and and how we interact with them. And on the flip side of this, I love is that surround yourself by the people who are lifting you up and
Yes.
supporting you. And I think so often we can get focused on that one or two or five people that don't like us in our life,
Mm-hmm.
instead of like really giving the attention to the 12 people who are like always there for
Yeah.
us and want to support us and want to be good to us.
Yep.
And I think that it's a shame that sometimes we just
That's the
we
tendency. Yeah, it's
yeah,
really
and that
weird.
it could be a self-sabotage
Yep.
thing or whatever, but yeah, just giving our attention to the people who really want to be a good part of our life.
Yeah, and I think for me, I have had the pattern of wanting to fix and support people. So it's like, oh, they need me, and there's something
Oh yeah.
satisfying about that for me. But then if I'm always showing up for the people that need me and are always having drama or complaints, or just kind of this constant cycle of downward spiral, and I'm always there trying to save them, like, that's not a healthy cycle for anyone, so being
Yeah.
able to identify that was huge for me, and being able to
Mhm.
say, I'm not going to play this game anymore, and step back. And even though that process is really painful, I think it's necessary in some situations. And it's not like you can never, I mean, maybe sometimes, you can never talk to that person again, but ideally you build yourself up so that you can have those conversations again. I had this with my ex, the father of my children, where I was just like, I can't, it just doesn't support my highest good or my highest self. Like I get really weird around him just because of our history. And more recently, I'm like, okay, I can see this for what it is, and I can engage and have a conversation and be friendly and be kind and receptive. And I can feel my edges where I'm like, okay, I'm done now.
Right. And that's the great thing is that it was just more mindful is what it sounds like. It was more intentional. Like I'm going to give him this much information because I have the same with my ex. And at some point it's like, oh, I can have conversations around data and logistics and stuff like that. That actually doesn't even trigger me anymore. As long and my boundary is that's what we stick to, like logistics and data. And that's how I keep myself, in that good space, because it's not just about like the triggers that I'm having, but it's also like if I'm having triggers, I'm not going to show up the way that I want to, and then I'm going to do something that is not in alignment with who I want to be, and I'm not going to feel good about myself or that other person then. And so we have to, it's our job to make those boundaries and to keep them, and keep them is like the hardest thing. Because we can say we're going to have a boundary, but we have to remember like it's our job to enforce those.
In the moment, in the heat of the moment, when your tendency is something else.
Exactly. Just to be quiet or let them walk all over you or just have their say and ignore it. And that's where I used to go, is I used to just get silent. Like I'm not, because I didn't want to have those petty arguments, but you said, and I said, and he said, and she said, and that's not what I meant. I don't want to do that anymore. Like it makes me crazy fighting point by point in arguments. Like, because that's not what it's about. When you have to go point by point in an argument,
it's so draining.
It's not about the argument.
No, it's about something bigger. So one of the last pieces that I love, that's okay. One of the last pieces I wanted to share was invite, I encourage my clients to do this too, is actually invite the challenges. And what I mean by that is deliberately going outside your comfort zone. And that can look all kinds of ways. But it usually looks like in that moment when you're feeling the energy build and you're really afraid to open your mouth, that's when you're supposed to open your mouth. Because if you don't go into the challenges, they will come at you.
Well, you'll be resentful later that I didn't open my mouth, and it'll just keep coming up and up and up, right? I mean, the universe is like, oh, you didn't like that challenge. Here's another one.
Yeah, you didn't get it the first time in the subtle way. Let's make it a little more clear and loud. Yeah, exactly. So being able to lean into the challenges, and like that piece that we were talking about before, trust that you have everything that you need to make it through that challenge, and don't get attached to an outcome, and be able to be adaptable and have your intention be clear. What is my vision? What am I declaring in the face of the challenge? Like, I'm going to get through this. I trust that we can both come to a loving place. I really am so clear that I want my children to thrive. So I'm going to keep showing up and, meet the challenge of the communication style of another person, or if it's a teacher or another student, like being able to advocate for something that you really believe in and keep showing up and know that you have the tools to navigate it and get what you want. Like that is all part of like, how do I move through depression? How do I move through anxiety? How do I move through overwhelm? Like go into it. I can't say that enough. And trust that you're going to know what to do, and trust that your heart's going to stay intact, and trust that you're going to be stronger. And I don't mean like tough skin stronger. I mean, like you're going to know more about yourself and the way that you
can start jumping over those bumps like hurdles instead of getting tripped up by them and getting stuck. Yeah. I mean, that's really, and in that way, resilience is so related to confidence, which is what I've been talking so much about in this podcast.
Beautiful.
And when it comes to confidence, there's a part that comes before, like we don't do the thing when we're confident. We get confident by doing the thing, right? I mean, and so that's idea. I think, right. Same idea is that we need to build a competency, which means that we need to go try it and do it again. And just like tying our shoelaces, we had to try it and try it and try it and try it until we could get it. And even after we got it a couple of times, we had to keep trying it.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
Right. But we didn't get the confidence. And I think so often there's people who are like, I'm waiting for the confidence or the resilience before I go do that thing.
No.
And it's like, you can't wait for that. It's a skill. They're skills that we build. They're not just feelings that we have.
You got to put yourself in the rock tumbler.
Yeah. And it's going to hurt. It's going to be uncomfortable, all those edges coming off, right? And smoothing. I imagine sandpaper on your rock skin, right? Like it's going to be uncomfortable.
Yeah. But then the light is on the other side and you get to know yourself better. And then you show up with more presence and resilience. And, you know, like I always like to say, fill your cup so that it naturally overflows. Like the exuberance of little girls playing together is just so like, you can't contain that. It just, it's overflowing. It comes as part of just their eliciting joy from anything and everything and being together and knowing themselves and their playfulness and what they bring. Right. And somehow when we're always like, oh, everyone wants my light, everyone wants my joy. And we're always like giving it away. Oh, here, this will make it better. Here, take it. And then we're left with our depleted cup and you can't.
And then we sit here and go, why doesn't anybody else take care of me the way I take care of everyone else? Right. And we get resentful and angry about it instead. And I really wish we were a little bit more narcissistic as a society. Say that on a podcast, but in the sense that like that we would look internally instead of like looking outside to be like, well, judging that person or that situation or how can I control those things to get what I want. I wish we would just start looking at how can I empower myself to make this within my control or within.
And I like looking at it as like the reparenting model, right? So there's like the judgmental destructive parent that is like, oh, you know, you need to be shamed and guilt into obeying and knowing that you should do the right thing, you know, and if you don't, then you're a bad
you
kid.
Feel bad enough, you're going to do the right thing next time.
Yeah. Versus an encouraging friend. Like that's one of my favorite questions as a coach. If you were your own best friend, what advice would you give yourself? Because for some reason it's there for us when we want to offer it to other people. But when we think about how do I nurture myself, it's just like, I don't know, you know, there's this like headlights thing for people often.
What I have my clients do is I ask them to get a picture of little them from when they were little. I have one right on my desk that stays here all the time. And because the part that comes up that has all those uncomfortable emotions, like we say, it is the wound, but it's in the child, right? Like it's because we've given this wound to the child and the child goes, I don't know how to deal with this. I don't know how to deal with this. And so how can we comfort that child?
Yes.
And so it is reparenting, like reparenting our own inner child and going, how is it that I can really care for myself in a good way? I would never cuss or yell at this little child, right? Like I wouldn't say the things that I actually say to myself to this little piece of me. And so how can we do it? And that's how I start choosing. We were talking about before how we choose compassion in a moment where we want to shame ourselves or punish ourselves. And that's what I do. I remember that I'm still that little girl. And even though I'm in a grown-up body and I have a grown-up life, she still is there and she's still seeing how I'm treating myself. And so, you know, that can make her really sad if I'm really mean to myself. And so having that compassion can be helpful.
Yeah. And sometimes you need to give her a nap or give her a drink of water or take her for a walk to go look at the birds and
go to her favorite places.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So I have one more thing that I just want to mention just because it keeps swinging around my brain is when I was in high school, I believe, I read this book there was a Dr. Jennifer James. She wrote, it was like some of my first self-help books. And one of the things that I've become resilient over is losing things, because it's one of those like little itches in life that happens where you just misplace something and it makes me, or I misplace something and it makes me crazy. And she has this whole story. It's about managing our expectations is what I'm trying to get to. She's like, if you lose a brush and you get frustrated that you've lost your brush or your wallet or whatever, what you want to tell yourself in life is that, like, I'm going to lose 12 brushes in my life. This is just one, right? So when I shift the expectation to going, this is completely normal.
Yes.
And this is just one of those times out of the 12 times in my life that this is going to happen.
Yes.
And so how can I know this is going to happen 11 more times. So instead of getting, explosively angry about it, how can I accommodate? How can I become more resilient? Because it's just a little bump in the road. It's not the end of the world losing a brush, but it is inconvenient and frustrating when you want one.
Yes.
So how can we rearrange our expectations so that this is normal?
Yeah.
And I think that about all of the little things in life that we're like, oh, well, there shouldn't have been that accident on the way to work. And there should have, that place ran out of coffee that I like. And they're just like little tiny little things. But like you said, they can all add up. But if we have an expectation that, hey, today, just like every other day, there's going to be some rough spots. Yeah. There's going to be some great spots. There's going to be some rough spots.
Yes.
And I'm just going to manage it.
Yeah. I think that one of the sharpest pieces of those incidents is that there somewhere inside of us, it's reinforcing a negative story. And we're just like,
right.
Like,
as if I deserve to not have my coffee or.
This always happens to me. Just like when my brother got the thing and I didn't, and they're more important, and I'm going to just be upset that, the world doesn't revolve around me the way that it did my brother or whatever. Right. So that's like the dialogue starts to play, and being able to identify that and like choose something else and be like, well, what else can I do? Like, how can I satisfy that itch or that need to feel important? And I think that this is, that conversation really.
Well, you have to look underneath it, right? Is the real struggle, because we think that our feelings just pop up and that's how they are. But our feelings are just results of our thoughts.
They're little stepping stones. They're little clues.
So if we can track it back to the thought, like, what is the message that this anger or this frustration or sadness is offering right now?
Yeah.
Oh, right. Nothing. It's not going the way I want it to. That's, 99% of the time. That's what it comes down to. It's like, that's not how I want it to go.
Yes. Yeah. And I think it's really beautiful because it points us in the direction of what's missing. Like, what do I need? And just like pain in the body, physical pain can be an indicator of illness or, something going astray in your health. There's something in our emotions. So it's like, something's not quite right. I'm trying to get your attention, but then navigating to like, well, what's the real need versus like if the emotion and the triggers and the amygdala are running the show, right? So you have to kind of.
That's why it's great to have a coach to ask you really great questions. Like, bring myself or Bernadine.
Yeah. And it doesn't always help for someone just to be like, oh, it's this, blah, 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 blah. Like asking the question and having them have their own insightful process is where the empowerment comes in, and where they're like, oh, actually, I'm really smart or wise or, intuitive. And then they can come back to that.
It's easier. I would never say like, it's coming from this for you, like, because it's easier for you to come up with it to begin with, let alone like you're the one feeling it. Right. And everybody's messages are different, slightly different, depending on, how we learn them. So allowing you the space to just start linking them together. That's what started happening to me when I was getting triggered, is like, okay, so how does this anger compare to this other anger that I had that other time and that other, like, what is the issue? How are they all connected?
Really great.
And it's often, I'm just telling myself I'm not good enough, or again, the world just ain't the way I have planned it in my mind.
Well, on that note, I think that's one of the things I have always adored about you when I met you, Christina, was that like authentic, vulnerable, raw processing of your being, like just showing up how you are and having that radiate, and give other people permission to do the same and have that their raw processes and be really truthful with themselves. And that is something that I gains me, gains a lot of respect. I just,
Thank
with
you.
me, is that I think there are people who feel embarrassed or ashamed to be real with the world. We've all been taught in certain senses, and with society at large, and Brene Brown talks about this a lot, is, out in the world, you're supposed to, control yourself more, or don't
Wear
make
your
other
mask.
people uncomfortable, or, accommodate the norm. And I think we're reinventing the norm, because if we don't show our true selves, we don't know what's going on for the other person. And then we're doing all these projections and all these assumptions. And most of those things come from our own wounds. So then we're just putting our own wounds on everybody else. And so then we're feeling alone, and like something's wrong with us because we can't play the game, and like everyone else appears to be doing it the right way, and it's all an illusion, because we're not being real with each other. Like, it's just stupid.
Yeah. Yeah, because we all wear our masks, right? And we have if we feel like, and I see it often, not just with clients, but just in the world, where people just kind of fluff themselves up. And if they just, instead of all the work it takes to pull off that mask, right, to show up as someone else, and as Brene Brown would say, fitting in, right, means that I'm showing up in a way in which I believe you'll accept me.
Yeah.
Instead of me showing up the way that I want to and hoping that the right people are going to be like, yeah, you belong.
Yeah.
And that's a huge difference for me, because I hate wearing masks. I detest it. And most people will know. I mean, it's never been a great quality of mine that I was direct and blunt and all of these things until I became older. And I was like, actually, those are great qualities.
Right?
I don't need to. Yeah, I don't need to hide behind pretending like my life is perfect. Our lives aren't perfect. And I think that the real beauty of them is embracing all of it, the bumps, the things that are frustrating, because it's all part of our humanity. And I think that's a better journey for my life, is I hope at the end of my life, I've been a good human.
Yes.
I've humaned good.
Yes.
I don't care about a big pile of money. I don't care about fame or any of those things. It's really I just want to know that I humaned in the best way that I could, really honestly and authentically with myself.
Okay.
And that takes resilience. It does take resilience. There are people who don't like me because I'm direct and I'm blunt. I'm kind. I say it how it is. I say what I see. And not a lot of people like that in the world, where we're taught to be nice. And just kind of show up so that other people will accept us. Yeah. And I say, if I'm not hurting you or your bubble, I don't think that's good enough for me. If I'm not hurting anyone, I should be able to show up however I want to, and whatever is really authentic. Yeah. And it doesn't mean that I always show up the way that I want to, but it's authentic all the time, right?
Yes,
I mean, there's still changes and shifts that I'm making.
Yeah. And then you let people make their own choices and be responsible for their own, what they do and don't want. And leaning into it and being curious is always something I invite, because then you can be really clear and authentic with the person. Wow, I really don't like that behavior in you, so I'm going to go over here. It doesn't mean that I don't wish you the best on your journey, but it's a thing for me.
I'm going to keep myself safe. Yeah. That's all. And I'm not putting it on you to keep me safe. Exactly. I'm not telling you can't be who you are. But if I think that your behavior is dangerous, then I'm not going to hang out with you, and that's okay. Or I'm going to at least keep my boundaries wherever that means. Yeah, and we can hang out. I've had
friendships that dissipated. People that I started out like, oh wow, we have so much in common, and you're amazing, whatever. And then something comes up, and I'm like, wow, I don't have a tolerance for that behavior, and I'm not going to try to accommodate. It's way too much energy. So I'm going to smile and be kind and say hi. But I'm not going to hey, let's hang out, or engage in some deep conversation where I know conflict is going to come up, because I don't like conflict. I really don't. But the clarity.
I love conflict.
I don't like conflict.
I mean, I don't love it in a violent or aggressive way, but I think that conflict teaches us so much about ourselves. And I think conflict can really bind relationships rather than separate them if we can approach conflict in a good way.
Yes.
I think the problem that we have with conflict is that a lot of, just like a bad emotions or uncomfortable emotions, we don't know how to do it in a good way.
Yeah. So I guess my distinction would be like, it would be a conversation of differences rather than a conflict.
Yeah. Okay, we've been having too much fun. We keep shutting down the recording. So we are back and we're just going to clean this up. So Bernadine, what else do you have to share with us? Thank you so much for this conversation too. What a great conversation around resilience and what it really means and how we can embrace it rather than associate it with, that's what happens after we do all those icky work and stuff and, have to get through all the ickiness, right?
Yeah.
Like I hate that it has that connotation because it's really such a beautiful word.
Yeah, it's really beautiful. I so enjoyed the conversation. And I think what I would like to leave on is like, it doesn't have to be work. What I have discovered is that when we are able to share what is difficult to share, and if you can ask someone to not respond and just witness you and receive you as you are and not try to fix you or make your sadness go away or, give you advice or all of that, like they just witness and have empathy. Like you can really feel when someone's with you, right? And they're connected to your process. Most of the time, I would say 80 to 90% of the time, that's all anybody needs. That's all I need. A lot of the time is just to be met where I'm at and witnessed.
Yeah. And if you don't know what they need, all you have to do is ask, how can I best support you right now?
Yeah. And maybe they don't even want to, but I don't know what I need,
Right. They might say, I may need nothing. I don't know. And you're like, great, I'll just sit here and listen.
Exactly. Just be with
right.
Or in silence even is enough. I have had a history of doing body work and healing work. And as a craniosacral therapist, I had the most profound sessions with just someone's hands resting still on my body. Like the body just wants to be witnessed and held. And as it is, without having to go anywhere or prove anything or, do anything or go anywhere. I probably just said the same thing, but
And it's so much easier. I mean, because there's so many times where if I'm with somebody in pain, like we can think of a million things that we want to do for them, not knowing whether or not any of that is actually going to help. Like I can go through mental gymnastics trying to figure out how do I fix this person, right? I mean, and I'm a coach,
especially
and even once in a while, I still can get stuck in that, and I'm like, hold on, Christina, this isn't about me. This is about them. They're going to get what they need. They're going to ask for it, right? And so I think it's because to me, when somebody comes in and just wants to fix it and doesn't want to listen to me, I'm shut down because it's like, I'm a strong, independent woman. Exactly. If I need your help, I'll ask for your help.
Strong, independent women out there. Yes. Sometimes people will say no just for the sake of saying no, because they're just like, there's nothing wrong with me. And I don't need you to tell me, and I don't need you to save me or fix me or tell me something I already know.
Right. It's just a witness. Yeah. It's so important. And that's part of our inner child too. That's the archetype that we have that wants to be seen and heard. And she's also the one with our wounds. So isn't that peculiar that like really she just wants to have her wounds witnessed.
Yes.
And I wouldn't say validated, but confirmed. Yeah. That it is okay. Yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah. So on that note, I do groups very similar to what you do, but I call them women's mastermind groups. And it's kind of a vision quest, rites of passage, but I do them online, partially in person, and 4 to 6 women at a time, and really wanting to integrate more art and meditation, but having that setting where women are witnessing each other, right? And eliciting each other's wisdom and helping us remember that everything we're experiencing is normal. Like it's so powerful, right?
Yeah.
So I think we have that similar alignment in what we do. And I'm hosting a retreat and going to do it again next year if you miss it this time around. And my my work is evolving as I am evolving. So if you want to find out more about me, you can just go to my website, womenwhoareuptosomething.com. And there's all kinds of tabs. I have a blog. You can sign up to get my free ebook, and then you'll be on my newsletter list. I have a newsletter that comes out every other week, and I try to feature someone I've worked with or women that I know that are doing amazing things in the world. And, that's how we connected. I love the, cross support of, getting the resources out in the world. I love what you do, Christina. I love all your wisdom and your sharing and how you support women and show up in such a potent way. Yeah, you are potent medicine, girl. And I just really receive that and encourage such things. So thanks for having me today.
Thank you. Of course. And Bernadine is very connecting. You can go find her. I'm sure I will put all of her links around here somewhere. So no matter where you're watching this or listening to this, you can get to her website and check out some of those retreats. They always look so delicious in South California.
Yeah,
correct?
I'm in the Monterey Bay in California.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes. So I was born and raised in the Bay Area, Silicon Valley.
So you have retreats amongst the trees and really beautiful places. So go check those out for Bernadine. Again, thank you so much for coming on and talking about resilience so that we could get past some of these judgments that we have about resilience and what it really is and how we can really get more comfortable with the uncomfortable. Because I think that that's really what resilience is about, is like trusting ourselves through the process of going through uncomfortable stuff, which is life.
Yep.
I mean, life is just that way.
Yep.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Hey, one more thing. When we are all more confident and full of self-love, we can act more intentionally and mindfully. What would a world like that look like? I want to know. One way that you can help me with this vision is to subscribe, rate, and review our podcast wherever you listen to it. It helps more than you know, and it's just a few clicks to help me create a more beautiful world. And as always, remember to be gentle with your humanness.